what were the maps like flying over China?
Well, the maps that we used were actually put out by the U.S. government, but the information was not always complete, such as it would show that there's a mountain somewhere, but no indication of how high it was because they didn't know. But someone like me got a lot of this information from people who had been there for a while, and they would share this. You know, they'd tell you this mountain, and so you'd write it on your map, and you were constantly updating things.
You did some flights out of Guangzhou, right? Some evacuation flights. Can you tell us about that? What was the climate like at that time?
I think it was pretty hot and muggy. I don't really remember specifically the weather.
I mean, climate as in, was it chaotic? People clamoring? Can you tell
people.
Us? Okay, sorry.
People were all over the place. There was no real order to anything. An airplane would pull up, and here would come a mob of people all trying to get on the airplane. And we would just have to stand by the door and let them in until you had the most that you thought you could take, and then just close the door and go. But there was, I don't know how many airplanes were doing this in that one day that I was involved. But that day, I think most of the people that were evacuated, of course I'm sure a lot of them walked out and went down the river on boats, but by air, there was probably 25 or 30 airplanes, maybe more than that, from 3 different airlines that were doing this and going back and forth just as fast as you could. We'd take them to Hong Kong, which is only 30 minutes, and let them off, go back and get another load. And I made, I'm not sure, but 3, 4, possibly 5 trips that day.
And what were people bringing on board with it? Was it quite desperate? People just took their belongings?
Just their personal belongings. I think mostly clothes. I really don't know, but they had all sorts of suitcases, boxes, like bed sheets or tablecloths or something with stuff in it and tied up into bundles, some of them huge bundles. And most of that was not very heavy, but lots of it. And they just stack all that in there, and away we'd go.
How about the people who couldn't get on board? Could you see their faces at the airfield?
Well, when you stopped letting people on, they'd run for a different airplane. There was, at any one time, there was usually 5 or 6 airplanes at least on the ground at any given time, you know. And so I think that most of the people that were around the airport at the time did eventually get on an airplane.
Did you ever?
I don't know.
Did you ever imagine yourself doing something like that?
Well,
you know?
I don't think I'd ever thought about it. No.
Most of the guys with CNAC, they flew over the hump, so they were quite experienced, right?
Yes.
So did you learn a lot from them as well?
Oh, yes. But when I worked for them, there was still a lot of those people there, but probably 75%. When the war was over, they came home. So most of the people that are a big part of the people that were there when I was had not flown the hump. They were like me. They'd done something else before that. Mm-hmm. But there were quite a few, and they had a lot of experience, a lot of valuable experience.
Well, what about that time you said, you were telling me you were kicking rice out? Where was that? That was in China. Can you tell us about that?
That was in China. That was in over the city of Taiyuan, and we'd fly down low, slow as we could, and they had these bags of rice back there, and people back there that you would holler, tell them okay, and fly down the runway or fly alongside of the runway, and they would kick this stuff out. And then while you're coming around to line up to do it again, they'd stack more back by the door, and you'd have to make four or five passes probably to unload the airplane.
Where did you pick up the goods?
Tsingtao.
What did your family, friends, colleagues, or ex-Army Air Corps think of you working for CNAC?
Well, quite a few friends of my friends were doing the same thing, but my family, I don't know, I don't know whether they approved or not. They never told me they didn't. And it was just pretty much just a job.
Mm-hmm. When did you actually leave CNAC?
Well, CNAC folded up and quit flying towards the end of 1949. And I stayed in Hong Kong for maybe a couple of months after they quit flying, and then I came back. I think I got back into the States in January of 1950.
Mm-hmm. And why did you join Tiger Line? What was the attraction? Was it the pay, or?
Well, it was a flying job, and now quite a few of the people I had known with CNAC were working for the Flying Tiger Line. And so it was, I needed a job, and it was a place I applied, and they hired me.
Mm-hmm. Was the working atmosphere pretty fun? I mean, I got that impression from a lot of people I talked to. Like, it was that can-do spirit that spilled over from the AVG / CNAC. Can you tell us about that? I mean,
well, it was, for the most part, everybody tried to do their job and do it right, and maybe even a little more than, in most cases, than was absolutely necessary, and we got along good.
What was the most unusual cargo you ever carried for Tiger Line?
Oh, I don't know. Hauled a lot of various wild animals. I hauled a whale one time, a small one, a killer whale. I hauled a lot of horses, a lot of live cattle. But things like, I remember one time we had 2 big hyenas in a crate that were going to a zoo in, I think, Los Angeles. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What was it like working for people like Bob Prescott and Tommy Haywood? You know, knowing that they were ex-AVG. Was the name something to be proud of, to work for their line?
Yes, I think so.
Why?
I always thought it was. Well, they were good people. They had started this airline. They put it together, and they worked hard, and it was a good place to work.
Was it a real adventure, besides the day-to-day stuff? But was it a real adventure being in Asia, being stationed in Shanghai, and then living in Hong Kong? Can you tell us about that?
It was very interesting. It was something different, a lot different than anything that I had ever been used to. It's still different if you go there.